ultimately, the hybrid workforce is what I see is going to happen where there will be agent leaders, and where humans will lead agents, but potentially even agents be leading humans.
AI's impact on content, business, and strategy is disruptive. Join us as we interview industry thought leaders on how to adapt. This is the Markup AI Podcast. Hi, Britta. Thank you so much for joining the Markup AI Podcast. I'd like to introduce you. You are our Chief Operating Officer here at Markup AI. Again, Britta Muhlenberg. How would you pronounce your last name natively, I guess I'd love to ask?
Well, in German, it would be Britta Muhlenberg.
I just don't have the phonetics to be able to execute that effectively, but I really appreciate you joining into this call. We're going to be, you and I, we work at an AI company. We're going to be talking about the different ways that us working in and personally using artificial intelligence in our lives and how it's been impacting ourselves. And I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about just your experiences with AI.
Sure. Yeah. Welcome everybody here listening in, and thanks for having me, Chris.
This is great. So I'd love to ask first, there had to be this kind of pivotal moment where you suddenly personally realized that, AI is kind of a big deal. It's going to make a big impact. Do you remember that moment where your mind shift may have, like, that realization really happened?
Yeah, I do remember that. And it was funny enough, you know how we have this Slack channel about generative AI, and we've had it for a while. And
Yeah.
I've been following that, and I found this to be a really, really excellent digest because, everybody in the company was kind of throwing things in there that they read online or saw or experienced. And what I saw in there eventually made me think, oh, wow, this is going to be huge. I remember something crazy that was posted there about potentially humans being able to understand how whales communicate. I don't know if you remember that article. And, just as an example, but there are always, interesting articles in there, but that's really when I thought, boy, this is different.
I don't remember that, but it is one of those where, it makes me think of how translation is just going to be so much either easier or
Mhm.
the experiences people will have when using applications or visiting countries or places that aren't in their native language, that AI can really help in these areas that you can't plan what those experiences are in a lot of these physical worlds. Something I'd love to ask too is, when was there a moment though where you came across something where the hype just didn't meet the expectations, where you thought we'd see more of something, something that just really kind of, didn't land when you were seeing AI being proposed in certain use cases or technologies?
Well, I don't have a certain use case or specific technology that I would call out. What I would say though is that, I work with our customers a lot. So seeing how they all are on basically the same journey, and they do it in different speed, but they're all on the same journey. And I think it was at the beginning of maybe 2024 or so when AI had completely hit large enterprise, and all of our large customers were starting to see that there were little fires everywhere. I literally heard that term. Or something like it's the wild, wild west out there. Everybody is trying their own thing. And that was the moment where I thought, all right, we see a lot that's going on, but it doesn't yet seem to be, funneled correctly or bundled ideally or combined in a way or put to action in a way that would really, really provide the lever and the leverage that our customers would experience or would expect. So I think that is something where that made me or gave me pause, because for a moment there, and that has changed now, of course, or as we know, but back in that time, I thought, I don't know if we're really going to be able to kind of ring fence it and make it workable.
No, I almost feel like it's this constant roller coaster where, innovations are made and ideas are set. And then as they get into practice, it's what's that curve that we talk about, the innovator's curve or however that
Mhm.
works. And then we start realizing, hey, we've only really taken advantage of maybe 10%. Like, for example, these old models that are now old, we're on GPT-5 and Gemini 3. I still feel like we've only scratched the surface with what the prior
Mhm.
models could actually do in
Mhm.
our testing. But I feel like it's like this roller coaster of like, here's the hype, it doesn't really do it, and then well, here's the real life use cases that we find that it can address and solve, and the real problems it can fix. Uh,
Well, yeah, I mean, I can speak to another example maybe that I had, just to what you just said. We have our internal, MCP implementation, as you know, and I've started to use some of this. And I was asking one of our agents there to help me with my very full inbox, and it was struggling to do that. And then our colleague Martin updated the model that it was using, and all of a sudden it worked. So that was a very clear a moment there for me to see, oh, well, there is a huge difference in the capacity or the power of generations of models. Very clear.
it's and worse, it's just getting it's like this the scaling laws, right? Of how those work. It's just insane to see what the improvements in these models that we're seeing and the context it can pull in. Um, and the further it's getting kind of driven into our everyday lives. And that actually kind of leads us into the next question I was going to ask you, which is more personally, how are you using AI, maybe not directly correlated to work? How are you using it more personally in your personal life?
So that's an interesting question. So for work, I mean, I use it as I just described, right? So I'm using it for ideation, for if I have content to write, to get me started, for research sometimes. But we have a number of really cool agents internally that I like to use, so that's great. For for personal purposes, um, I do use it, and I've used it for travel planning with the kids. I used it actually for dinner planning and recipes, and um, really more a research tool for me in my personal life than really something where I would use a workflow or something. But yeah, for research and for that type of thing, I do use it quite regularly, I would say.
Nice. Similar. I made a GPT of like my wife's and my kids' interest to help give me like planning gift guides and whatnot that have been pretty decent for like
That's
giving other
awesome.
ideas. I just I always leave everything to the last minute. That's my challenge.
That's awesome. Well, maybe maybe one fun example. I have set up a household plan with my children so that we kind of share the different household tasks. And I
Nice.
had I'm actually using ChatGPT, if I may say that, but it had helped me to create a great plan that is well balanced and where everybody has approximately the same level of load, and that changes
Right.
over time. And so we have a weekly rotating plan for all of our household chores.
That's does it identify the chore itself and give an estimate of like effort required to help offset? Is that how it like figures it out?
I don't know exactly how it did that, but it did a really good job at balancing stuff. I gave it the tasks, but it balanced it out really, really nicely.
Nice. That's pretty cool. I
Yes.
I should probably do the same here, but it's just like every day we get up, it's just chaos. We have to figure out what we're doing the day of. I got to get more planning into my days.
Well, I think my children are also a little bit older than yours. That makes it easier.
Yeah, it makes it easier on the day, but more expensive as you go, I guess, right?
Very true. Very true.
So I'd love to ask the next question here that I'd love to ask you is where do you see the biggest opportunities for AI technologies, whether that's, in business or in real life? Where would you see the biggest impact potentially coming?
Oh, wow. There are so many. It's really,
Yeah.
really hard to pin the one biggest impact down. And we've touched already on a few. I think it's going to help us communicate easier across language barriers, for example, right? Or where accessibility is needed, where we need, to communicate with people who have disabilities, for example. So I think that's a really great um, impact that it can have in ways in which we communicate to each other or with each other. From a business perspective, I really think that I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? It's around workflow efficiency, and really automation, where companies will, in my view, as we progress with this, will really lean into using AI to help with busy work, help with work that's cumbersome, that is repetitive, and all of the necessary but more low quality kind of work, and then really free up capacity, time, and brain space for their employees to really do high quality work. I think that's what we're seeing, and I'm probably thinking too small, but looking at the ways in which things are being used today, I think that is that is the biggest change that I'm foreseeing is really, you know, let's let's have the machines do what is easy and what doesn't necessarily have to be done by a human, and then we can do the rest.
I no, I agree with you, and that's where I remember there's an ad that or a newspaper periodical that made a comment saying I was looking forward to not doing my own laundry and spending more time doing creative work, but in fact, AI has kind of inversed that. AI is doing my creative work. Why won't it do my laundry? And it makes me think of, I can understand that perspective. But now what I'm realizing is there are so many things that I used to be bogged down here at work when it came to coming up with ad ideas, different types of copy, A/B test materials,
Mhm.
that data analysis that used to bog me down and actually hinder me from being able to do the things that I really do want to do and love to do, which is talking to customers, creating content, publishing things, sharing stories, investigating and researching. Um, that has opened my ability up to do more of that and provide more value into
Mhm.
places like here. And same thing personally, where I can use it to help kind of either research challenges that I don't have time to research or answer questions that could be complex, like, not that you're supposed to be getting tax advice from these things, but to identify avenues and challenges and ways to solve problems that you may not have thought of. It's been saving me a boatload of time and doing a lot of those mundane tasks. So I feel you with the ideas of efficiency and the impact that it can really bring across folks, whether it's, work related or personal related.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one other question I'd love to ask here is, and this is a bit more focused on our org and what we do and, how we help the, businesses and enterprises maintain content quality, brand consistency, compliance requirements and content. As we see that content in the future is really starting to become like hyper
Mhm.
personalized in some scenarios being generated on the fly for experiences. What do you feel are the best ways for businesses to one approach that effectively to make sure that they're keeping materials in the right tone or brand narrative that they need to portray or that they need to have when they're creating these assets?
Well, I mean, the structure of the solution is probably not going to change so much from what it used to be. So there's a clear set of rules, and please make sure that while you create content, these rules are being adhered to, and we can ensure that the content is compliant. Now, when the content scale or volume is exploding and is getting a different scale, that's going to be difficult to be doing with humans. So I think it's the same process. It's guardrails. It's basically rules, sets of rules that ensure everything is standardized. But we will need to see tools that help with that, just simply because of the scale of what we're going to see in terms of content being produced, right? And I think that AI can help with that as well, right? It's about making sure that you leverage the power of AI to ensure that these guardrails are being met and are being um, adhered to, especially when there's much larger volumes of content that are being created than in the past.
True. And so that leads us into one of our next questions, which is, in a future where humans are really less involved in almost the user experience, this idea of
Mhm.
agency and agents that are taking actions on this behalf, as AI is the potentially could become the dominant consumer of that content.
Mhm.
How do you see businesses adapting into a digital world where, yes, we're trying to keep this content on brand for consumers to make sure that our customers, our audiences are consuming the content and that it meets our brand standards and styles and requirements. But as AI becomes that dominant consumer and humans are using those agents to take actions, whether it's to use this app to do this thing that I normally would do in it, how do you see businesses adapting to that when the digital audience shifts or needs to be both at the same time.
Yeah, I think it'll be, basically like with every innovation or disruption, like the one that we're seeing right now, it'll be in waves. I would see, and also, in different cohorts, if you will, right? There will be companies who totally lean in, who embrace it, who will create businesses that are almost exclusively built with AI agents and just a couple of humans to kind of, maintain them, to kind of train them and make sure that guardrails are being met but or adhered to. But there will be, I think, the majority will kind of lean into it and will start to create what I call hybrid workforces, where you have humans and agents interacting, where you have humans and humans interacting, and where you will have agents and agents interacting and everything, together. And that will totally require a different perspective on workforce and what that means for the businesses. I think that will be the majority. And then you will have the laggards, right? The ones that are afraid of the technology and that really don't know how to approach it and that will be falling behind. But I think ultimately, the hybrid workforce is what I see is going to happen where there will be agent leaders, and where humans will lead agents, but potentially even agents be leading humans. Who knows? But I think, I'm quite fascinated about to see what's coming, but this is what I'm expecting.
I agree with you on that. And to say that agents leading humans, I mean, I can already see that happening. It happens to me at times. When I'm asking for, brainstorming ideas or approaches to problems that I may have, that is almost the idea of an agent leading a human, whoop, as I'm hitting my mic, into the solutions or scenarios I may need to address. Things that maybe are just not inside my mind or that I could think are possibly capable to approach with. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's happening almost now anyway. I had one last question I wanted to ask before we concluded here, and it is really around the mistakes or the challenges. What do you think the biggest mistakes or challenges are that businesses are going to face today as they deploy AI technologies?
I think the biggest mistake that a company can make in this journey is to think too small. And I think
Yeah.
that's going to be, if you think too small, if you don't allow yourself or, the company to experiment, to seek inspiration, to learn from others, learn fast. I think that's the biggest mistake. If you're too careful, too restricted with this, um, yeah, that's going to put you in the last cohort that I was just describing, right? If you're too scared, if you're too risk averse, um, and not leaning in far enough, then I'm sure you will fall behind as a business.
I fully agree. And kind of as a follow-up to that, would you be able to share some of the things like, here at Markup AI internally, I feel like we're well enabled to be able to take those risks, that research. Can you talk about a few of the practices and policies we've put in place here that other companies could follow to help kind of bring that ideation and that level of creativity into their organizations?
Sure. I mean, there's a number of things. I think one of the first things that we did was I spoke of the AI, generative AI channels that we had for a long time to just kind of educate each other. But I think one of the more practical things that we did was to kind of lower the barriers for AI tool experimentation. I mean, we work with large customers. We have very high requirements in regards to information security. So our vendor reviews usually are quite deep and quite detailed, and they take a long time, but we wanted to kind of speed up. So we lowered the barrier for experimentation in a bit of a, safe space, so to speak, where people can use, test data and use it for a limited amount of time, a tool that they want to experiment with. And I think that has sped up our willingness as an organization to actually try out, for one. Another one is that we're actively thinking about, generative AI upskilling across the board. I mean, we have a bunch of developers, we have technical account managers, we have, generally speaking, a more tech savvy workforce, I would say. So there's a lot of, natural interest and also no hesitation to just go and play. But we also have some roles like, that don't usually work with this new technology all the time. So We did surveys about where are you at on the journey, and we're in the process right now of really organizing um, micro learning, but also really facilitated learning around AI, just to make sure that really everybody is equipped to use this technology and use it, as best they can.
I'll be honest, from an employee perspective on this side, again, like I said, I've never felt more enabled to be able to go in and test applications. I feel the org has done a great job. So for those of you watching that are looking to deploy this, absolutely enabling groups of folks to lead a charge. So having a small group, a small team to help lead trainings and initiatives. And I think the best thing that I was able to help get the most adoption with was to solve other people's biggest problems. And
Mhm.
like, for example, mine was I built the advisor. And it was more of a selfish thing because people would come to me and ask how to phrase benefits to a certain persona in a certain industry. How do we compete or compare against this competitor? And it was at a point where I was the bottleneck to help get people this
Mhm.
information. So by kind of being selfish and lazy and creating this agent, I'm now solving such a problem for other folks to generate these correct responses. That was one of the best ways I saw people really turn their heads and start adopting and saying, wow, this is solving my bottleneck issue. And that's kind of what I feel like turned the lights on for a lot of folks that I was engaging with. And I just feel like it's taken off like wildfire across the organization with the level of enablement we've had here.
100%. And if you look at our, at our, MCP implementation, the if you browse through the agents that are there, I mean, some are really creative, and it's fascinating to see how people just play with it just for the sake of learning and getting
Yeah.
their hands dirty with it. And then, being really, really creative about how to use it. And that's so super fascinating to me.
Oh, I agree. Britta, thank you so much for joining. And thank you
Of course.
everybody for watching this episode. We appreciate you tagging along. And if you have questions for myself or Britta, add them into the comments below. Would love to get back to you and follow up. Britta, again, thank you so much for joining. It was great to have you.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
AI's impact on content, business, and strategy is disruptive. Join us as we interview industry thought leaders on how to adapt. This is the Markup AI Podcast.